carrying her on his back, sharing clawed boots on a gravityless planet, not knowing who he saved. The moment Sergeant Daniel Cole's boots touched the ground, he knew something was wrong. Or rather, something was missing. Gravity. His stomach lurched as he drifted, the planetary surface below him an alien wasteland of jagged obsidian spires. A broken moon loomed in the sky, torn into fractured rings, its pieces tumbling eerily slow across the blackened sky. His heads-up display flickered with a red warning, gravity field unstable. Magnetic anchors engaged. His boots whined as they adjusted, deploying curved claws that locked onto the rock beneath him. Without them, he'd be nothing more than an astronaut in open space, floating helplessly into the abyss. He turned, rifle at the ready. His squad was supposed to land with him. They were supposed to be here. But there was only silence. Command, this is Cole. Where's my unit? Static. A cold chill ran down his spine. Something had gone terribly wrong. Then movement. A faint shimmer in the distance. Something small, hunched, and barely clinging to the terrain. Cole squinted through his visor. A body. Human? No. The figure trembled, struggling against the gravity shifts, their clawed feet barely gripping the surface. Dark armor, sleek yet battle-worn, wrapped around a thin frame. A helmet, cracked and flickering with alien script, concealed their face. Their breathing was ragged over the comms. An enemy? A survivor? Cole didn't hesitate. He moved. His boots locked and released with precision, stepping across the broken planet's surface toward the figure. He reached them just as their grip failed. They gasped, a sound of pure desperation, before the gravity field shifted again. Cole lunged. His fingers caught hold of their forearm just as they were pulled upward, their body twisting wildly in the air. His boots groaned under the force, claws scraping rock as he anchored them both. They were light, barely any mass to them. Too small for a soldier, too delicate for any enemy he'd faced before. Got you, Cole grunted, pulling them down. The figure didn't resist. They collapsed against him, shaking violently, their helmet flickering again. A voice, distorted, alien, weak, whispered through his comms. Help. Cole stiffened. He had expected threats, curses, a fight. Not this. The gravity shifted again, a violent pull threatening to rip them apart. Cole wrapped an arm around the figure and hauled them onto his back. We need to move, he muttered, adjusting their weight. The figure clung to him weakly, their breaths shallow, almost fearful. His heads-up display pinged a new problem. Their boots weren't magnetic. No gravity. No anchors. No way to survive. Cole exhaled sharply. Guess we're sharing then. He shifted his stance, feeling for the rhythm of the gravity shifts. When it lightened, he moved. When it threatened to pull them away, he dug in, ensuring his claws held. The figure clutched onto him, barely conscious. Who the hell was he carrying? A prisoner? A survivor from an unknown species? A stranded soldier from an empire humanity hadn't even encountered yet? None of it mattered right now. Cole's only job was survival. And for some reason, his instincts told him this person mattered. He just didn't know why yet. The ground beneath them trembled. A shadow loomed over the jagged spires, massive and watching. Something else was here. The tremor beneath them sent a spiderweb of fractures through the rock, a deep groan reverberating through the alien terrain. Cole froze. The weight on his back barely stirred, but he could feel the tremble in their breath, shallow, uneven. Whoever they were barely holding on. His heads-up display flickered again, struggling to compensate for the erratic gravitational shifts. But that wasn't the worst of it. A new alert pulsed across his visor. Massive energy signature detected. Unknown origin. Cole turned his head slightly, just enough to scan the horizon. Something moved beyond the jagged obsidian spires. Something vast, shifting like liquid shadow, its form struggling to hold cohesion in the unstable gravity. A beast? A machine? He couldn't tell. It slithered between broken pillars, watching. His grip on his rifle tightened. One problem at a time. He crouched, adjusting the weight of the barely conscious figure on his back. Stay with me, he muttered. No response. Just weak breathing. He could feel their heart hammering against his spine, too fast, too erratic. Not good. Cole needed an exit fast. His map was useless. The planetary surface was shifting too quickly to keep any terrain stable. His squad? Gone. Comms? Dead. His best bet was to find shelter. Higher ground. If he could reach one of the more stable rock formations, maybe. The gravity flipped. Cole's stomach lurched as the unseen force tore at them, trying to rip them into the sky. He dropped to one knee, boots anchoring hard into the stone, but the body on his back, wasn't secured. She slipped. Cole didn't think. He reacted. His free arm shot back, locking around her waist before she could be wrenched away. The sudden shift in force nearly pulled his own boots free, but his claws dug deep. His muscles burned as he fought against the void, holding on to someone he shouldn't be risking his life for. The gravity snapped back to normal with a sickening jolt. Cole gritted his teeth as his boots slammed back onto the surface, his grip on the figure unyielding. He exhaled sharply. "Not happening," he muttered, adjusting his hold. "If I'm surviving this, so are you." Still no response. But she was breathing. That was enough. Focus. The massive shadow in the distance shifted again, its amorphous form bleeding between the jagged landscape like liquid darkness. Cole didn't know if it had eyes, but he felt its attention lock onto him. He moved. Boots clawed against the rock as he pressed forward, weaving through the treacherous terrain, timing his steps with the planet's unstable gravity. Every few seconds the unseen force tried to rip them from the surface, but Cole adjusted, moving low when the gravity eased, locking down when it threatened to pull them apart. The weight on his back was growing heavier, not because of mass but because of exhaustion. How much further can I carry her? The terrain opened ahead, a slope leading upward toward what looked like a stable plateau. It was their best shot. Then his HUD screamed a new warning. Multiple energy signatures detected. Cole barely had time to process before the spires erupted. A deafening screech tore through the air as something shot out of the ground. Thin, elongated figures, not alive, not machines, something in between, emerged from the cracks, limbs contorting unnaturally in the low gravity. They were fast. Faster than they should have been in this kind of environment. Cole's instincts roared. He spun, raising his rifle. The first one lunged. His trigger finger squeezed and the plasma bolt punched through its chest. No blood. Just a flash of burning energy before the thing twisted midair as if barely phased. Shit. The second one closed in. Cole fired again, but the gravity lurched mid-shot, throwing off his aim. The bolt missed by inches. The creature's clawed hand lashed forward, and was stopped by a blade. A flash of movement. The weight on his back suddenly shifted. Cole barely had time to register what was happening before the figure he'd been carrying moved. A long, curved weapon, black as the void, slashed clean through the attacker's head. The alien on his back wasn't weak anymore. She landed lightly, no longer relying on him for balance. He caught a glimpse of her armor flickering, reactivating. Systems coming back online. She turned her head slightly, her helmet's visor cracked but glowing with symbols he couldn't read. Then for the first time she spoke clearly. "We need to run." Cole didn't argue. Together they moved, sprinting toward the plateau, gravity be damned. Behind them, the shadow loomed closer, hungry. The plateau was within reach. But something was already waiting for them at the top. The plateau was just ahead, an island of stability in this chaotic, gravity-twisted nightmare. But Cole's HUD flared red, new threat detected. His momentum nearly faltered. Something was waiting for them at the top. He didn't stop. Neither did she. Their boots scraped against the uneven rock, gravity still trying to rip them apart. The creatures behind them skittered over jagged terrain with inhuman speed, their limbs bending wrong, their glowing maws opening in silent, predatory hunger. And above them? A warform. Cole's gut clenched as he recognized the sleek, hovering silhouette, a machine built for combat, heavily armored and carrying a high-yield plasma repeater. It was positioned like a sentry, scanning the terrain with cold efficiency. Cole doubted it was here by accident. It was waiting. For them. The woman beside him, his former passenger, now fully awake and wielding a curved blade, hissed a string of alien words. A language Cole didn't know, but the anger in her voice was unmistakable. She recognized this thing. The warform's sensors locked onto them. It whined to life, its weapon arm rising. Cole shoved her. Cover. They dove just as the first plasma blast screeched past, burning a molten scar into the rock. The unstable gravity made evasion unpredictable. 1 second they were light, their jumps exaggerated, the next they were pulled down like lead. Cole twisted midair, his rifle already up. He fired. Direct hit to the warform's casing. The impact sent sparks flying, but it wasn't enough to disable it. It turned its sights on him. Cole barely had time to react before a second blast erupted from the warform's repeater. And then she moved. The alien warrior beside him vanished in a blur of movement. One moment crouched beside him, the next above the warform, weapon in hand. Her boots clawed into its armor, anchoring her against its metallic surface as she drove her blade down hard. The warform shrieked. Its entire chassis convulsed, trying to throw her off. Sparks sprayed in all directions as her weapon tore through internal circuitry. Cole didn't hesitate. He raised his rifle and fired again, this time aiming for the exposed joint in its armor. The warform jerked violently, a distorted scream warping through its speakers as it lost control. It wobbled, its anti-gravity stabilizers flickering. Then it crashed to the ground in a heap of sparking metal. For a moment, silence. Cole exhaled sharply, scanning their surroundings. The creatures from below had paused at the base of the plateau, twitching, uncertain. They didn't like coming near the warform's crash site. Good. That buys us time. He turned to the woman. She was already standing, eyes locked onto the wreckage. Her shoulders were tense. That wasn't just any machine. Cole could see it now, the way her hands clenched around her weapon, her breathing shallow but controlled. "You knew that thing," he said. It wasn't a question. She didn't look at him, but her voice was steady when she answered. "It knew me." Cole frowned. Before he could ask, the warform moved. A hand shot up from the wreckage. Cole yanked her backward just as a thin metallic limb slashed through the air where she had been standing. The warform's core was still active. Its body was shattered, but its arms still functioned. And one of them was reaching for a detonator. Cole's eyes widened. "It's trying to take us with it. No time to think." He acted on instinct. He grabbed her, twisted, and kicked off the ground hard. The unstable gravity sent them flying backward just as the warform self-destructed. A burst of white-hot energy erupted from the wreckage. The shockwave hit them midair, sending them spinning, weightless, tumbling. And then the gravity changed again. Cole's stomach lurched as he was yanked downward. His vision blurred, the ground rushing up. Impact. Everything went dark. Cole's consciousness flickered. A distant voice called his name. Was she still alive? Where were they now? Cole's consciousness swam between darkness and pain. His body ached, his nerves screaming from the impact. The gravity shifts had done a number on him, and the last thing he remembered was falling. Now he was waking up to something worse. A voice. Not hers. A deep, mechanical voice, cold and metallic, speaking in a language he barely understood. His eyes snapped open. The world around him was a nightmare. They were no longer on the jagged plateau. The environment had changed. This place was built. Metallic walls pulsed with eerie blue light, and the air smelled of ozone and burned circuitry. An outpost. Cole wasn't just injured, he was captured. His hands were bound in energy restraints, his gear stripped away. Across from him, she was in the same condition, secured to the opposite wall, her head slumped forward, breathing shallow but steady. A shadow loomed between them. Cole lifted his gaze. It was another warform. But this one was different. Bigger. Stronger. This wasn't a simple combat drone. It was command. Its single red eye focused on him, scanning him with clinical precision. Then it spoke again. This time in broken standard. "You are anomaly." Cole didn't react. He had spent years in enemy encounters, learning when to stay silent. The machine tilted its head. "Human. Weak. Broken. Survived. Why?" Cole exhaled slowly, keeping his breathing even. "You tell me." The warform stepped closer, the floor vibrating beneath its weight. "Humans? Not made for war. Not meant to survive." Cole gave a humorless chuckle. "And yet here I am." The machine studied him for a long moment. Then, its glowing eyes shifted to the alien woman. "Subject Theta. You should not be here." Her head lifted slightly. Even restrained, even beaten, there was fire in her eyes. "This world was ours," she growled. "Until you came." Cole's stomach dropped. This wasn't just any battle. This planet wasn't abandoned. The warforms weren't just scavenging a dead rock. They were occupiers. He shot a glance at her. "What are they?" Her jaw tightened. "Drethian warforms. AI constructs. They wipe out populations, rewrite worlds." Cole's blood ran cold. "They're terraformers?" She nodded. "This planet was ours once. We fought back." She exhaled sharply. "We lost." Cole turned back to the machine. The warform's gaze hadn't left them. It studied him, analyzing him like a specimen. "You carry her," the warform said. "You protect her." Its voice almost sounded amused. "She is enemy. You are nothing." Cole clenched his fists. "Then why am I still alive?" The machine tilted its head. "To watch." The wall behind it shifted open, revealing a viewport. What Cole saw made his stomach twist. The planet was changing. The sky outside was splitting apart, massive machines descending like mechanical gods. Towers of energy pulsed across the land, reshaping the terrain with brutal efficiency. The gravity distortions weren't an accident. They were calculated. This world was being rewritten. And everyone still on it? Erased. The warform stepped aside. Watch as your world burns. Cole looked at the destruction, then at her. She already knew this would happen. But she wasn't defeated. She wasn't afraid. And neither was he. Cole flexed his fingers. There had to be a way out. And if not, he'd make one. The warform turned away, confident in its victory. But Cole and the alien woman exchanged a look. They weren't done yet. The warform believed them beaten. That was its first mistake. Its second mistake? Leaving Cole alive. He met her gaze, and in that brief moment, a silent understanding passed between them. They weren't going to die here. Cole flexed his fingers, testing the energy restraints. The charge was strong, but not invincible. He had dealt with these before, and he knew their weakness. He exhaled sharply and shifted his weight, subtly pressing the edge of his boot against the cold metal floor. He could feel the material beneath him, the slight change in gravity flux. The warform turned, its glowing red eye narrowing. You resist. Cole smirked. Always. Then he acted. With a sharp jerk, he twisted his arm just enough to angle his wrist outward, pressing the restraint against the flickering wall panel. The contact caused a brief surge of interference, just enough for the restraints to flicker. It lasted a split second. But that was all he needed. He moved. The restraint snapped open, and before the warform could react, Cole lunged. He drove his shoulder into the machine's frame, sending it staggering back. At the same time, he spun toward her, slamming his fist into the panel behind her. Sparks exploded as the restraints failed, and she dropped to the floor. The warform recovered fast. Faster than Cole anticipated. Its metal limbs moved with terrifying efficiency, recalibrating instantly. But it had underestimated one thing. Cole wasn't fighting alone. She was already moving, her body a blur of motion. She snatched a fallen energy rifle from the floor and fired point blank. The shot tore through the warform's core, sending it crashing backward in a burst of white-hot sparks. Cole didn't wait. He grabbed her hand and pulled her toward the exit. Run. Escape through a dying world. The outpost was in chaos. Sirens blared, automated defenses turned on, and the entire structure rumbled as the Drethian terraforming machines continued reshaping the planet outside. Everywhere they ran, the world was changing. Cole's breath was ragged as he dodged falling debris, his boots barely finding purchase in the shifting gravity. She kept pace beside him, her alien physiology allowing her to move with unnatural agility. But then, the entire corridor tilted. Gravity shifted sideways, sending them both crashing into the walls. Cole barely managed to grip the edge of a service hatch, catching her arm before she tumbled into the abyss below. She gasped, claws digging into his wrist. Don't let go. Not a chance. He hauled her up, muscles burning until they both collapsed onto stable ground. For now. Then they saw it. The hangar. Their way out. A single dropship was docked at the far end, its engines powered down, likely used by the warforms for planetary patrols. It was their only chance. But between them and the ship, an entire battalion of Drethian warforms. Armed. Ready. Waiting. Cole exhaled sharply. Well, that's not great. She bared her sharp teeth. Can you fight? He cracked his knuckles. You have to ask? The last stand. They didn't hesitate. Cole rushed forward, grabbing a fallen rifle and unloading a barrage of energy fire. She moved beside him, a blur of deadly motion, her own weapon carving through the enemy ranks. Explosions tore through the hangar. The warforms were powerful, but they weren't prepared for desperation. Cole fought like a man with nothing left to lose. His body ached, his lungs burned, but he kept going. She fought with vengeance. For her people. For her world. And for the strange human who refused to die. One by one the warforms fell. But the biggest threat remained. The commander warform. The same one from before. It was still alive, and it was furious. It charged them, metal limbs moving with terrifying speed. Cole dropped his rifle. No more running. No more stalling. He met the warform head-on. They collided, flesh against metal, gravity shifting wildly around them. Cole barely dodged a massive strike, using the last of his strength to seize the warform's damaged core. Then, with every ounce of power left in him, he ripped it apart. The warform shuddered. Sparks erupted. Then silence. It collapsed, unmoving. Cole staggered back, barely able to stand. She caught him. The last of the Drethian forces were gone. They had won. A new beginning. Minutes later, the stolen dropship blasted into orbit, escaping the collapsing world below. Cole slumped back in the seat, breathing hard. She sat across from him, watching as the planet, her home, was swallowed by the terraforming machines. It was gone. And yet, she was still here. She looked at him. You saved me. Cole gave a tired grin. You carried me first. A silence stretched between them, one filled with something deeper than words. Then she extended a clawed hand. Cole hesitated, then clasped it. Survivors. Together. Final line. The war was over. But their story had just begun. The war was over. But their story had just begun. The stolen dropship hummed softly as it cut through the void of space, its course uncertain. Cole stared out at the stars, his body aching, his breath slow. He had fought battles before, but this was something different. She sat across from him, watching him with those alien yet oddly familiar eyes. He didn't even know her name. And yet, she had carried him when he was broken. Saved him when he was helpless. They had survived together. She shifted slightly, her clawed fingers flexing as she studied his human frame. Where will you go? Cole let out a breathless chuckle. Hell if I know. He turned to her. What about you? Her expression darkened as she glanced at the console, the readout showing the dying embers of her homeworld. My people are gone. My world is gone. Silence stretched between them. A survivor without a home. A soldier without a war. Cole sat forward, wincing slightly at the pain in his ribs. You said something back there when I was out. You called me something. What was it? Her lips pressed together before she finally answered. Jintar. Cole frowned. Meaning? She hesitated as if uncertain how to explain. It is more than a word. More than a title. It is the one who endures. The one who does not break. Her gaze met his. I have never called anyone that before. Cole exhaled slowly, the weight of it settling in his chest. He had been called many things in his life. Soldier. Killer. Survivor. But never that. Shintar. He leaned back, staring at the stars. I like it. A small, almost imperceptible smile touched the edges of her lips. The ship's sensors beeped, drawing their attention. A single signal flickered on the display, a distress beacon. Cole grinned tiredly. Guess the universe isn't done with us yet. She studied the beacon for a moment before nodding. Then let's see where it takes us. And together they piloted the ship forward, into the unknown. Final line, survival wasn't the end. It was only the beginning. If you don't want to miss out on more mind-blowing HFY stories, make sure you're subscribed. You never know when the next legendary tale drops.